Welcome to the Experts and Expats podcast. I'm Jeffrey Jones.
And I'm Michelle Hippler. We're co-founders of the Living Abroad Academy.
We're so pleased you've joined us today. We've set up this podcast as an extension of our mission at the Living Abroad Academy. We plan to introduce you to experts, expats, and others to help you envision and plan your time in Europe, extended visits, or even a move there. Because we're Americans, one key thing is that we're focused exclusively on U.S. citizens and information for them, so it'll be specific to those people. But first, a bit about our organization, the Living Abroad Academy. It was started by Michelle and I. We've been friends for a long time, both, similar paths, even professionally. And it's funny, we've been through a similar process of exploring expat life in Europe and maneuvering the very interesting visa process. And, in many ways, we're still doing it, right, Michelle?
Yeah, I'm still in the midst of it. You're sort of at the beginning of your journey in Europe.
That's right. I have the visa, but there's a lot. It's evolving. There's more to do. So we'd like to start by telling you a bit about our mission at the Living Abroad Academy. We have some key tenets that, some promises to you. First, and this is a pretty funny one, we promise not to sugarcoat the experience of moving abroad. Many of you've seen videos, it's prevalent in social media. There's a lot of expats and influencers that, sangria, tapas, baguettes, wherever they are, everything's beautiful and fun. And friends, a move like this is a wonderful thing, but it's also not easy. Take it from us, people that are doing it. It's also not easy and can and most likely will test you.
Yeah. I think if we get into why we even started doing this is one, you had a lot of friends. You had a lot more friends than I did asking you how and why you were doing it. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to start doing this. But also we spent years on the Facebook group, for different countries. I've had multiple countries I was looking at. Jeffrey was always interested in Spain. Well, actually you did Italy, right? And France too.
Oh yeah, it's that's part of our story. That's our journey. Yep.
But those influencers on YouTube, the Facebook groups, it's like a lot of them are still in the honeymoon phase, or they're trying to make a buck off of explaining their life right wherever they are.
Yeah,
so they don't really want to get into the nitty gritty and the downside of some of this that happens along the way.
Yeah, I think we really want to be realistic and give you a clear perspective. Like Michelle said, we're not here to sell you the idea of moving abroad. I mean, it could be a great thing for you, but, we're helping you with the decision process of to do it or not do it. And then, if you decide you are right for it, then what could be the right place for you? There's a lot of decisions, right? And there's a lot of steps to get there. So we'd like to be helpful to you in your process.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that there are a lot of different motivations for why people want to move abroad. For us, some of it was quality of life, cost of living, healthcare, but also we're pretty big travelers. We always have been big travelers. But politics also sort of fed into it, just in terms of quality of life. I equate the politics to the quality of life. And one of the things we don't want to get into, one of the reasons why we did want to move somewhere else was because people talking about politics. And we don't want to do that. You can find that elsewhere. We have our opinions, but we want to be respectful of everyone else's opinions too regarding that, because you may want to leave because of politics that are the, 180 from me, and that's okay. This is really going to be more about the process of moving and some of the more sort of details of moving. And also just hearing a bunch of different stories, why people are wanting to move.
Yeah, there really are various reasons. I mean, some of it's just wanting, in the retired years or as you get older, wanting to be able to get out and look around, travel some more, not wait once a year for a vacation. But, down to politics, costs, so many different things. And it can be all of it.
Yeah, right.
Yep. Both Michelle and I used a do-it-yourself process. And you can do that. And we were doing that. I've lost track of. I believe it was 6 years for me. How many years for you?
Well, I'm calling it 8 because it started in 2016 and where I went nomad full time and then eventually ended up in Southeast Asia for a bit. So,
that's right, I remember that.
But it was during all of that time. I was actually seriously looking at Portugal at that time. too, but not ready or able to make that move at all, but researching, a lot of researching, and Facebook group, hanging out and lurking on those, groups like that. So it's been a long time.
Yeah. But similar for us, my spouse and I, we had this idealistic vision of, well, I shouldn't say that, but we love Italy. We still love Italy. But we thought, wouldn't it be great to be in Italy? And, that was 2000, similar to you, I think it was 17 or 18. We started that, and you start getting into the nitty gritty of what's involved in moving to these places, and you start seeing the complexity.
Yeah.
And it's not just about where you want to go. I mean, it's a big part of it, but how possible is it?
Yeah. And when I first started researching, it started with, because it wasn't just the politics at the time in 2016, it was also climate change and the realization that nobody in any governmental position was going to do anything to avert the worst possible scenario. Yeah. So I was really I had a criteria, and I even sent an email out to friends who I thought might be interested in moving as a group to do co-housing or eco-village or something like that. And the criteria included, a number of different things: the economic stability, the governmental stability of a place, the climate, I was looking at a lot of different factors, healthcare. And then there's the whole aging thing too. We are nearing retirement age ourselves, and, doing this so much later in life. I really want to think about, well, when I get to the nursing home stage of my life, what is that going to be like as a foreigner in a foreign country?
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
So there was a lot of things that went into it beyond, I think what a lot of people really consider for this type of a move. A lot of people are looking for adventure. They want to just go live in a cool place, And,
yeah.
So,
and but we were talking about years, right? You had 8 years, potentially we had 6. Not everybody has that timeline. A lot of things are happening in the world. Some people would like to move in the next couple of years. I've heard people that are like, I want to be moved by this fall, and they haven't started. Well, that's aggressive, but
right.
we're here to hopefully be an accelerator.
Yeah.
For the process, because we've been through it. We've got things organized to help focus your thought. And that really, I think, ties into our next tenet. And that is that, oh, yes.
Well, I was going to say, beyond just being an accelerant through that process that we can help with, is that also to avoid things that you may not be thinking about. I'm thinking of that CNN article that we just saw. You shared with me. It was just 2 weeks ago, I think, where they started out in one country and a lot of things went wrong because they hadn't done some groundwork and some move information gathering, and they ended up having to leave that country and go to another one and find it. But it's that's an expensive mistake to make,
It's nice to do a lot of that before you go. We were doing that. We got into the red tape mess before we left, and we were like, this is going to be, some people are very successful in Italy. We're not slighting that country, but for sure, there's a lot of complexity that's nice to know about in advance.
Yeah. That was in Italy to Spain, right? They started in Italy and then went to Spain, and that kind of follows your trajectory. You and Oscar are really looking at Italy seriously.
Yeah. We started in Italy, and I still love Italy. And one of the nice things about Spain is being able to go to Italy quickly.
Right.
We love France. We were curious about Portugal. Spain, Spain's a lovely country. No country's perfect, but they make it so, I don't want to say easy. It's not easy, but easier.
Right.
To get a visa. It's a great process, and they're fairly well organized. I'm really surprised based on things I'd heard.
Yeah.
So I'm really thankful to Spain.
Yeah.
For that.
But also Italy kind of went a little south politically and culturally in terms of your situation too, which took them
That's
off
a great
the map,
point. Yeah, when you get, we said we wouldn't talk about politics, but when politics go that far right, it depends on what some people, they may love that. But it's not for us. Oh, no, we're not, and I know I have some friends that aren't necessarily focused on our topics, but they don't want to be in a climate that conservative. So, you just have to pay attention to that. Politics is important.
Yeah.
So our next tenet really ties into that, and that is that, especially Americans, right? We're working with you. You're very busy, and there's a lot to think about here. So, we really want to help you organize your thoughts and give you the info you need to make judgments and decisions. We want to help you organize that. So, we've been through it. use our work to help you make your work faster and more painless.
And one of the ways that we want to do that with this podcast is that our plan is to talk to a lot of different people who have already done it, who are already settled in a new country, and talk about their story, just share their journey. And then we also kind of want to mix it up and talk to people who are maybe at the beginning of the journey and use them as like, come back later to tell us like, what are you dealing with now? At the same time, sharing our own journey, because Jeffrey is completely into Spain. And I do have a resident permit for the Netherlands, but I still have a number of steps that I have to do to make it like solidified for my 2 years there. And I have to do that within 6 months. And I'm now starting to quibble about whether I want to do that or not. So, there's just like all these kinds of stories so that, that's kind of like how we want to share it too, is to give you a bunch of different stories and then also offering some of the things that we have that can help accelerate the decision-making process, really.
So it's funny, a lot of people, they are very enthusiastic about moving. They're doing math. They're like, oh, my healthcare is going to be cheaper, or, we'll be able to travel more. And one thing that they may not have thought about is do I have the right personality?
Yeah. Mindset.
To move abroad? And that mindset, exactly. Yeah. It's a funny thing, and it may not make sense, but one great example is I heard a story a couple of weeks ago about a couple that was returning to the U.S. because they wanted to shop. They wanted to buy a house. They were being, it's kind of an American trait. You want to have some real estate. So they moved to Spain, and, they started, I don't know at what point they were in the process, but they were looking at real estate, and they became frustrated. And, we've experienced this. They don't have a formal inspection process like happens in the U.S. So that really unsettled them so much that they left. They decided to come back to the U.S. because of that detail. Now, that's a detail.
Yeah.
I can tell you a lot of details that are getting, that they're not bad. It's about things that are different. Yeah. Are you comfortable with the details changing, and how many details? And you've got to be flexible. You might call it flexibility. You might call it patience, but things are going to change. You're changing the setting, and you're going to have to bend a little bit, change the way you do things, and be okay with it. Are you okay with that?
Yeah. And depending on where you're going, too, like each culture has a different way of doing things. Like Southern Europe, they're a little bit slower. The bureaucracy is known to be like challenging, especially for Americans when we're so used to having things, when we want them for the most part.
Exactly.
But even like the Netherlands, my daughter and I were just there for a few months, and it was like super Western, super efficient, but weird things would just pop up that were like, oh my God, like you can't use your credit card to have your groceries delivered. You have to have a bank card, and so different things like that. And it's like, how much patience do you have for that beyond the honeymoon period? Because, in the honeymoon period, everyone's okay with like little things being wrong. But when it's a daily or a monthly thing or a yearly thing, it's a different thing. So we kind of want to delve into that idea of what is the mindset and what are the things to look out for and to consider before selling your house and packing everything up and moving.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know we went abroad, stayed in Spain. Once we decided that was the country, and we'll get to that in a second, but once we decided that was a country, what's a nice thing in this era of Airbnb is go there and stay for 3 months.
Yeah.
Grocery shop. That's part of, it's good to get out of, you need to go beyond 2 weeks, get out of vacation mode. And I call it vacation mode.
Yeah.
There is also the honeymoon period, but get out of vacation mode and, stress test yourself.
Yeah. I think it brings up, how we were thinking about who our audience was for this. We're not focusing generally on retirement. That is definitely a part of it, but we're both working professionals still. We work for ourselves currently, but I have been over in Europe living as a digital nomad as an employee too. And so we want to kind of get into how to do that. I mean, Jeffrey, you want to retire as soon as possible, right?
I'd retire right now.
Yeah, I know. But it's like we're transitioning into that. We're not quite ready for it yet. And we still want to work while we're over there. And so those are some of the other things that we're going to be really covering a lot in our podcast too. And in some of the little products that we'll be offering over time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So I just mentioned, if you feel like you've found a country that would be right for you, that's the next step. Once you realize, do I have the right mindset? Am I ready to go? What are my priorities? Then it's the country selection process. And that's a big deal. I mean, I think that was probably half of our not longer of our 6-year process, was figuring out which country was right. So that's something we really want to help people with, that we, our listeners, our customers, we really want to help you to, find the right fit for you as far as a country and an area to move to in Europe.
And it actually selection of the country, and this is what our compass is going to be doing. We're working on a location finder compass that we'll be offering. It's, sometimes the country might be selected because of your mindset. That you can't deal with like extended bureaucracy, being told to go 40 miles south to an appointment and getting there and at great expense and, time and effort to get to the appointment, only to be told, oh, that doesn't happen here. You got to go over here. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, but because there are other countries where the bureaucracy is not that bad. And maybe that's, that you can't deal with that. And so, right. That's what our location finder is going to ultimately try to help. If you are not decided on a country, if you have not decided on a country yet, we're going to be offering like a way for you to be able to maybe figure out what is a better country for your personality or for your criteria. You want to buy real estate. You don't want to buy real estate. You want to be close to other countries where you can ski, in the winter and be on the beach in the summer. And so those are all of the considerations, and we're going to be looking at multiple criteria to help you accelerate that decision if you have not made a decision yet.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully that compass too will help you realize not only, you might think your criteria, but it will probably most likely call out some other things you hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
That maybe you should consider between these countries. So, we're trying to make it all in one place, and especially our initial product should give you something that's pretty easy to scan, and it's a great conversation starter with whoever needs to make that decision. All right. So, unfortunately, and both Michelle and I have learned this, is that you think you have some information on a country or an area or a visa, and then I can say from Spain, the next month it changes. Yeah. 3 months later, it changes. Oh, that's not offered anymore. Or, oh, they really don't like tourists now. They're spraying people with squirt guns. Different things happen.
Yeah.
So,
for instance, let me just give an example. That was a pretty significant example, was Greece. Up until, I can't remember if it was July or August now of 2024, people could get a resident permit by purchasing real estate. I think it was 250,000 euro.
Yeah, very low
pretty
price.
Cheap. Yeah, pretty cheap. And then in July or August, it got up to 800,000. So that is something that you really need to
for the same property, right? No,
right.
Yeah.
No, not for the same property, but it was like you have to buy a much more expensive property now because, for one, it's probably because, the people in Greece can't afford, affordability. Housing affordability is a problem worldwide now. So those are the sorts of changes that can happen. And there's been a lot of visa changes elsewhere in Europe also recently.
Yeah, it keeps changing. We had some, I don't even want to get into it. There were a lot of details that changed that actually in some cases improved our situation. But it's not always that way. But you need to be updated about what's happening because unfortunately, I'm going to bring up the word politics. It has gotten political. Some of these visa issues and foreigner issues and tourism issues, they're all tied together. Yeah. And, so it's being manipulated a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and also the countries that were desperate for people with money to come and, live there and spend it there, they've been overrun. Like Portugal has been popular since 2016. I mean, it was popular, but I mean, it's really exploded in popularity since then, since I would say the pandemic. I actually went over and stayed there the minute the pandemic, travel restrictions were lifted in Europe. I went and I stayed in Portugal ready to actually pull the lever and to apply for the permit. I had everything in place. And it was actually my first time there. I didn't do pre-trip, I was just ready to get out. Basically, that was my mindset at the time.
Right.
And it was once I got there, it was it was lovely. It was amazing. But I kept thinking, do I really want to live here? And just that whole process was also something that I've talked to Jeffrey about extensively, that you can have, everything can look good on paper. everything could sound great on the Facebook groups, right? And in YouTube videos. But it's like, until you get there and like really feel it and really think, okay, it's going to be like this for like the rest of the year. Like there won't be, this isn't a vacation. This isn't just an extended digital nomad stay. This is going to be me dealing with the Portuguese language, you know, all the time, right? And I ultimately didn't pull the trigger. Other things happened, and I returned to the States and kind of regrouped. And so that stuff happens, and that's kind of
it's great that you got on the ground. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, right. I didn't do it sight unseen. A lot of pandemic people did like do sight unseen purchases and moves.
Countries are interesting. You know, I was just discussing with someone earlier that it's a lot like people. Like, you never forget how someone made you feel. Like countries, you don't have to agree with everything. You don't have to love the language or plan to learn all of it. You don't have to, you know, choose to eat some weird food that you don't like or what. You just have to feel good about it.
Yeah.
Do I feel good being here? Do they make me feel good? Do I feel good walking around? Do I feel good taking the transit?
Yeah.
Do I feel good, you know, getting groceries? Do I, you know, you think you know how things are going to line up. It's not really that. It's something. It's a feeling. At least that's how I operate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So it's so important. Like, you went to Portugal to spend time there. I like to laugh. Everybody, you know, we help people think about different countries. And I have so many people tell me, if I just had a $20 bill, shouldn't I just move to Portugal?
After you tell them you're going to Spain, they're like, well, have you considered Portugal?
Oh, I hate that one. Did you know about Portugal? No, I've never heard of that. Can you tell me something about Portugal? Yes. I mean, you know, it's a lovely country. We just chose not to move there.
Right.
It is lovely, but no. I mean, you know, you pick a place for this reason or that reason, and you know, it means something that your cousin Bobby told you should move to Portugal. You know, maybe he's smart, but you know, also look at some other sources besides cousin Bobby. Yeah. So anyway, Portugal has had great marketing, I must say.
It has. And there's a lot of people moving there, and then they get on YouTube and they start their own channel, and then they talk about how great it is, and they get their affiliate marketing links, and they do the whole thing, and it becomes a side gig. But it's like, you know, not everybody is suited for that. I definitely want to return to Portugal, and I want to spend more time on the Central Coast. That was the area that I was really looking at. But it would be more for a long stay, just because it's like, I don't know. It didn't resonate. It didn't resonate with me.
It's a great word.
Right.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's happening with the Netherlands too, for very different reasons, But those are the things. And ultimately, I don't know. It's like, because I keep saying I'm getting older now, and I have been a nomad all my life. Right. But I'm kind of wanting to do more stable things, but at the same time, I'm not ready to make a choice. I feel like,
I think you're a dream case for slow travel. I mean, you're a slow traveler. You love it.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't commit to a place. For those who for those who don't know what slow travel is, that's, you know, you spend a month or two in each place and you keep going and just enjoy travel, and that's okay.
Yeah. And for me, right now, I've made the statement that I don't want to go anywhere for less than 3 months. Like, that's how tired I'm getting of moving. It's not the travel.
That's a long time for you.
Yeah. And it's like, it's enough time for you to really settle in and get a feel for a place, you know, too. And so we just did that with the Netherlands. Like, I've been to the Netherlands a few times already, but in vacation as a tourist, because it was too expensive. For one, Amsterdam, right? It's the only place I went. Well, this time, you know, we stayed closer to The Hague, and I don't know. It's like a lot of things went wrong with that trip. So that really colored my perceptions of the country. I know wrongly so. I kept saying I'm blaming the Netherlands when it really wasn't. It was more like the landlord. But but at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it did feel like it wasn't the right energy, at least where I was. So now that I have a permit, you know, I can go back and I can stay as long as I want to, and I can move around and maybe find a better area that I want to stay in than where I was. It was oddly polluted too. I mean, it was very close to the beach, very close to like the biggest tract of woods that I think the Netherlands has, because they chopped them down a long time ago, I think, or they just never had them. I don't know, but it for whatever reason in that spot, they always had really poor air quality. And I think it's because of the cars. It was,
Well, that's a thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Some people say like Valencia, and Valencia's had a lot of, there's been some influencers that are, they've been saying Valencia is the greatest city in the world, and they won some award. Valencia, Spain, to be clear. And, we went there in the summer. Bad choice of timing. It was an oven. It was a very beautiful oven. Oh, that's right. You visited
I was
us,
there
and
last
it's too
year
hot
on
here.
my birthday.
Yeah, that's right.
It was so hot, and there was no air conditioning in this apartment that I stayed one night, and the next day, because my brain was so affected from the heat, and the humidity is even worse than the heat.
It is very humid there.
I wasn't thinking straight, and I got an air conditioned Airbnb like near the old town.
Yeah.
I think I paid $1,100 for like 7 days, something crazy.
But
that
it
if
was
my
beautiful.
brain were working, I would not have done.
Yeah. But then again, so Valencia, we want to go back in the winter or the fall or spring because it is a beautiful small city.
Yeah.
And it's a little provincial, but it's lovely, and it could be very nice if you go at the right time.
Yeah.
And when all the locals, I didn't realize all the locals were out of town when it's hot like that. But it has a great art scene. It's just the kind of thing, like give it a chance at the right time.
Yeah.
And know when you need to leave.
Right. Have a plan to spend the winter up north, not the winter, summer.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are people who do that have different homes. Michelle, should we share a little bit about I know we've been referencing our experiences, but should we share, just get a nutshell of what we've been through and our trajectory?
Let's do it from beginning to end, the journey. So for you, Jeffrey, what was the inciting trigger originally for your dream to move to Europe? Because it always was Europe for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there was I did love Latin America at one point, and I spent a lot of time. Yeah. I love Mexico. There's a little town, Jalapa, Mexico. Just love that city. There's some places in Latin America, but what I would see happen in Latin America, I encourage anyone, if you love it, to try to go live there. But what would happen in Latin America is there suddenly would be gangs.
Yeah.
Like it even happened to some famous influencers recently in South America, but suddenly there's gang presence, or it's tragic. Why does that happen?
Yeah, and well, look what happened with Ecuador recently, right?
Absolutely, and those
remember the Cuenco influencers have left. They have left, and they had spent 2 or 3 years extolling the virtues of Ecuador, and then suddenly things changed. Was it an election? Or something happened?
Probably somebody corrupted, let gang activity in there, and apparently it overflowed from. I don't know. I really don't understand, so I don't say it. But and it's tragic. And those influencers, they have some really nice, useful videos on the web. And maybe the blessing of that is they went to Europe and have given us some nice videos about Europe. So they try really hard, and they have some good content. That was they really enjoyed Ecuador. But that's what happens in Latin America. So we took we've always loved Italy, and we took a trip to Lake Como, and I was like, gosh, what a beautiful place. And I started researching that, and we were like, it'd be great to live in Italy. So that's where it started. And we started researching that and got mired in red tape. Like it was, and it just, some people can handle that, but I realized we're going to need attorneys. We're going to need an attorney up to get this done. And I don't know how long it's going to take. And buying a home seemed complicated, and even a €5 home, whatever those are. And so, we began to research other countries. We were looking at France. We were looking at Portugal, but, I'd always loved Spain, and I actually tried to move. Barcelona is a favorite city, and I had tried to move to Barcelona 20 years back, and the economy changed and didn't happen. So I already had some familiarity with it. So we made some visits and started, as we were researching Spain, that very friendly visa policy from Portugal. It was contagious. Like they sort of started copying some of that in Spain and set up their own program. And then we realized, hey, we could really do this. Now, this is over years, right? But it was really a couple of years ago that we realized this is going to be possible with this digital nomad visa, with the contract work I have. COVID was I don't want to say it's a blessing. That's the wrong word. But COVID pushed me out into a contract job that gave me flexibility. To move to Europe, to work from Europe. So that's what happened. Wow. So we, about a year ago, worked with our wonderful attorneys at Ball Sales Group in Barcelona. That wasn't a paid plug. They've earned it. They helped us very neatly get this process done. it's just, I have to say, it wasn't difficult. They steered all the paperwork. It was difficult in all of the, things we had to submit, and a lot of communications. And we started in the U.S. from our sofa in L.A. on the video with them early in the morning, and, having meetings and exchanging paperwork. And then, earlier this year, we were on the ground and finished up the process there. And now have our little card, our visa residency card for Spain. So we exited Spain in the European residence line, which was very surreal. But as we left the country.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be able to do that. I get to do that the next time I got my card.
Yeah. So what about your story?
Well, like I said earlier, it was 2016 when I really got serious because, one, I was an empty nester then, too. I'd launched my daughter. Mm-hmm. And had I quit my job, with no, right, no backup. And then you got me a job. Actually, you got me that job. So I had some money to kind of just figure out things. And so I went off and I did a nomad thing for a while. I actually went to California and got to spend some time there, which I'd never been able to live there before, and just loved the East Bay area. Oh my God, I fell in love with it. But while I was there, I was kind of looking for something, and a friend who had just moved, well, I guess he'd been there a few years. He was in Vietnam. He was in Ho Chi Minh City. He had an extra bedroom. He's like, come and stay for free and I'll show you around. And so I did that, and being really open. I'm not against Southeast Asia. I've never been to Vietnam. I had been to Japan, and I loved Japan. I always wanted to go there, maybe spend a long time there, but traveled around Southeast Asia, and for, reasons like the heat and the humidity is really hard, but also the hyper-capitalism and the degradation, of the environment, through that hyper-capitalism in particular in Vietnam. And then just the sexpat community, just so totally turned me off, because I was like a 50-year-old woman, and all the white men my age that might have been dating material, all had 18-year-old Vietnamese girls. So
That's wild.
It was wild. It was totally wild. I don't know how much has changed, but it was very intense, in that time period that I went, which is 2017, I believe. So Southeast Asia is off because I also didn't trust the food. The chemical use to get the food to market was just really horrific. And there's a lot of cancer happening in Vietnam as a result of that, too. I did go to Thailand. Thailand, I think, I think, the beaches were awesome. I just can't imagine being there year round, or, even doing slow travel there for very long, just because it's just not my cup of tea. So when I was in 2016, when I first started looking and I was really researching, the reason I started researching Portugal is because I had looked at South America. It is cheaper. And I was unevenly employed at that time. So had more insecurities and didn't want to go where I'd have to pay a lot of money for rent and stuff. So I looked down there and I hung out and lurked on Facebook pages, and I got really turned off with Mexico, just because of the influx of people that were going down there. And then what they talked about, and it's just the way they talked, the traffic to get to Costco was terrible. What's going on with the infrastructure here? And I'm okay, it just felt so neo-colonialism. These people have not able to make it in America, taking their money and going to cheaper places, and then kind of taking over and ruining it for the locals. And it's I just really didn't want to be part of that problem. And also Mexico.
To be fair, there are Europeans that think that about us in Europe.
Exactly. So in Southern Europe, I'm sure. Yes. And we are even digital nomads. I'm a part of the problem no matter what, because of the housing thing,
Yes.
So, but down there, it just was the attitude that I just could hear in these Facebook groups was just my God, this is just these are the people I don't want to be my neighbors in America, even going down there. But I know that's kind of mean. But
I think there's different kinds of people in different places in Latin America, the Costa Rican, the Costa Rican expats are real,
But Mexico is the murder capital of the world. There is so much bloodshed there all the time, and I just couldn't handle it. Even I know that they try to keep it away from the tourist stuff, but it's still my God.
It is a lovely, lovely culture. It's just that, you're right.
Yeah.
The crime is tough.
So I eliminated South America just because also heat and humidity. I cannot handle it. I couldn't handle it in Vietnam. I can't handle it in Valencia. I can't handle it anywhere anymore. Like I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest, but I have lived in Seattle most of my adult life. So when I went to Portugal, there was a lot of things like about it that really, inspired me. And so did a lot of lurking. Like I said, it was all that kind of just, taking notes, doing research. But I did decide that I did want to be in Europe because it is a Western world. It is like a first world. I do agree that Southern Europe and Greece, and Portugal and Spain, it is bringing in those American bucks really does make a difference. It does elevate your lifestyle beyond what the locals are living. And so I just don't know that I can get around that. It didn't seem the same inequality as in South America, though, So
Yep.
I focused on Portugal because they had the new digital nomad visa, and it was easy. It was going to be the easiest and fastest way and cheapest way to get an EU passport. And that was really my goal. That's why I'm kind of country agnostic. Seriously, yes. Because my goal is to get the passport. My goal is to be able to move freely between the states or the countries while I'm there, and then ultimately maybe move to a place that I really want to be, right? So my goal was really to find the fastest, cheapest, and easiest path to a passport. And at that time when was that? 19, I got there like right after the borders opened up. So maybe it was into 2020 then. Yeah.
And all these visas offer a path now that I know of.
Yeah.
It's just different timelines, right?
Yeah.
But they all, if you stick around and don't rob banks and do stuff like that, you're going to get a permanent residency and eventually a passport.
Yeah.
But you were also looking at the timelines.
Yeah. And, the Portugal thing, too, was really interesting because what happened, and this is something that we can get into about going over as an employee versus self-employed, and even the problems of being self-employed depending on who your contract is with. I was fully employed. I was an employee of a company, a Fortune 500 company that was fully remote even before the pandemic. And I was planning to work from there. And I made the mistake of telling my boss that I was going to do that it was not necessary for this to be done. Like I would still be doing it right. I don't know why I was kind of stupid at telling them that I was going. And then they freaked out at the last minute. And at the last minute, because I was going to go in February of 2019. Or is that February 2020? When did the pandemic? March 2020 was the pandemic start, right? When things closed down. I was going in March of February 2020. I had my ticket and everything. And I had to pivot like at the last minute. And at the last minute, at that same time, one of my best friends from high school died. And so I was like, okay, screw it. I'm not going to Portugal. I'm just going to go over back to Illinois and go to my friend's funeral. And by the time I came back to Seattle after that, that's when everything shut down. I think I had COVID. I think I got COVID on that trip because I was sicker than a dog in March. Yeah, and that was just coming out that Snohomish County had the first case, which was like north of where I was. But so I was planning to go to Portugal before the pandemic, and then I ended up going after. And I actually luckily got laid off from that job in the pandemic and had a free paid ride through the pandemic because of unemployment. So
there you go.
Yeah. So I was ready to go.
The mixed blessing of a layoff or the pandemic.
Yeah. It was the best thing that could have happened in my life because it was a horrible job. It was really, really stressful and horrible.
Yes. Remember that.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what happened. And then Portugal was just like, I didn't want to do it. And other things happened that made me come back with my daughter. And then kind of regrouping and then spent the last year, that would have been 2023. I quit another job and took a sabbatical and went and traveled all through Western Europe. And I did little trainings. I did like a month on Ibiza doing an eco-village design course. I was just really kind of searching for what I really wanted to do in this next period of my life and to also see different countries and see if there was maybe a place I might want to stay. And through that process, met a woman who was doing the permit for the Netherlands. And she told me about a program that I had never heard about. It's not even on the Netherlands website, but it is truly the fastest and easiest and cheapest way to get a passport in the EU.
Okay.
So that's why I've gone with the Netherlands, not because I love the Netherlands. I don't even know it that well. But, as a nomad, it really doesn't matter to me in the long run. Like, at least right now, like I said, I have conflicting visions of the future. I do want to be settled. I do want to have one home base somewhere, but I probably will still do slow travel even when I have a home base. And I didn't want to stay, like I said, if I'm going to get in the Netherlands, I'm not going to spend the winters there. I'm not going to do that cold and rain. I spent 20 years in Seattle,
Yeah. And to our listeners, when you get one of these visas, there are requirements for how long you need to stay in each country. So that's a detail to look at.
Yeah.
I know Portugal was kind of relaxed about that, but they're not all the same.
Right.
That's a key detail. And if you want to be out of the country, there's different facets of that. But definitely something to look at.
Yeah.
All right. You've got a great story.
And it's not over because I have this permit and I got kind of really turned off during my time in the Netherlands. I just got back from. And so I'm really, really just like, I'm ready to walk away. That's the other thing about me too. Is like, if it doesn't feel right, I'm okay walking away. I don't have that much money in the game right now. I did hire someone to help me. He's a Dutch native. And I did apply, but it was like really minimal. It was like, I think I paid 350 euros for his help on, translation and setting appointments, and like almost 400 euro for the application fee. And then that's it. Like I have to go back. I had to leave before I could complete the whole process. They got me the card though. They gave me the card first. Now I have 6 months to complete the process, which entails having to set up a business there. I have to set up a business. I have to have 4,500 euro in a bank at all times. Like it can't go below that. And then I have to sign up with the Chamber of Commerce. And I got to sign up with the municipality. I have an address, a registered address that I do have with this guy. He's a friend of a friend. And so that's kind of where I'm at. It's like, well, housing is hard to find there. Like, do I have to keep using this registered address of this guy to keep it? Or do I go and rent a place that's affordable and in a place that I like? That's where I'm at. And I have until like February, basically the end of February, to decide. And I'm like keeping open. Like I may just say, I don't want to go now. Yeah. Figure something else out.
It's funny how they gave you the card so early, because we finished the process and then we were waiting for the card and somehow couldn't get an appointment. And this is the funny thing that happens in Spain. Somehow we could see the card was there, but we couldn't get the appointment because the system was down or something. So finally our attorney said, go over there and tell them you're going to go in and get your card. Stand there until they let you in. So that's all we did.
Oh, nice.
And we got it. But we spent probably $4,000 all in between the attorneys and all the translators and all these things we had to do. Now, they handled stuff for us. We didn't do, we sent them paperwork, and they did a lot of, there was even one point where there was a glitch in the way the data was entered, and they told us, it was going to be 3 or 4 more weeks because of that glitch. Yeah. The attorneys, these wonderful attorneys, they did something, called their friend in Madrid, and the next day we had the appointment. So that's, if you get a good attorney, you get what you pay for. Like, they're going to smooth it out. But you're very heroic.
I mean, there was a glitch with me too, but I just want to also point out that you had to like rebook your plane a few times, which costs money every time you do that because you couldn't get the appointment, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. We spent an extra. There's more thousands of dollars there. Yeah, but we spent extra money because we couldn't get this appointment or that. We didn't realize there was one more. Yeah, it was some fingerprinting, and we just didn't realize some details in the process. You don't know what you don't know, right? Yeah. If you're also not told it, then that's a problem. Yeah.
Well, what's weird with what happened with me was that my friend had just gone through the process like a few months earlier than me. And it took her 2 months. Like that was from beginning to end. It took her 2 months. And the last thing she got was the card. It was they flipped the process between her and me. Like It used to be that you did the chamber and the municipality and the business thing. You got that that had to be set up before you could get the card. And for me, it was just like, get the card. And there was even a point where like you have to bring your birth certificate to come in and have this appointment before we can say yes or no on the card. Well, I go into that appointment with my birth certificate, which took me $200 at the end of the day to FedEx it from my sisters, right? But I get to that appointment and they're like, oh, well, you've already been approved. You don't need to do this appointment. You should have gotten the letter in the mail saying that I said it was out of the country. I was in Slovenia for a trip. And so it was like, no one's even seen my birth certificate. And I don't even think they're going to ask because I have the card. They printed it and gave it to me before I left. Well, because I had already planned to leave and there was some delay in getting my appointments to get that card, I didn't have enough time because there were no appointments for like weeks and weeks to go to the municipality. So I couldn't have, if I had been able to do all of that while I was there before I had to come back, I'd be golden. But now it was like it got delayed. And it was because there was no appointments, no slot openings like for weeks and weeks. So that's where my thing is. But it was weird that it was flipped from my friend who had just completed her process like 2 months earlier.
It turns into a funny chess game of, you have to get this done this fast, but there's no appointments. You're like, well, how do I do it?
Yeah.
Like, you need a magician or something. Sometimes it's tricky, but hopefully it works out for you.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We're
still working on it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, those are our stories. So, besides this podcast, we have some different things in the works at the Living Abroad Academy. You'll find them all on our website at livingabroadacademy.com.
Sign up for our newsletter and stay up to date on our latest podcasts, events, and more.
You can also submit questions and ideas for future podcasts on the website.
We appreciate you being a part of our community. Thanks again for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.